Why aren't you trembling, human? One word from me and my pet will devour you. Without short heading 0402. The massive doors sealed behind her with a sound like thunder, and she found herself standing alone in a space designed specifically to make visitors feel small and helpless. The chamber was enormous, carved from black volcanic stone that seemed to swallow light itself. Torches lined the walls, casting dancing shadows that made the carved images of conquered worlds seem to writhe in eternal agony. At the far end, elevated on a platform of skulls from a dozen different species, sat Kriegther himself. The Scarath warlord was a sight that had reduced seasoned diplomats to stammering children. He stood nearly 4 meters tall, his reptilian body covered in scales that shifted from deep crimson to obsidian black, depending on the light. His eyes were the color of molten gold, and when he breathed, small wisps of smoke escaped from his nostrils. The Scarath had evolved on a volcanic world, and their biology reflected that harsh origin. But it was not Kriegther himself that had broken the will of so many ambassadors. It was the creature that lay coiled at the base of his throne. The Void Stalker was something out of nightmares. 3 tons of engineered predator, it combined the worst features of every apex hunter the galaxy had ever produced. 6 legs ending in claws that could tear through starship hull plating. A mouth filled with rows of crystalline teeth designed to pierce energy shields. Eyes that could see in every spectrum, tracking prey across dimensions. Its body was covered in interlocking plates of bioarmor, and its tail ended in a cluster of venomous spines. Every species that had encountered a Void Stalker had the same instinctive response written into their genetic memory: run or die. Sarah Chen did neither. She walked forward at a steady pace, her sensible shoes clicking against the stone floor. She wore a simple gray suit, carried a small briefcase, and had her dark hair pulled back in a practical bun. She looked exactly like what she was, a middle-aged scientist who had been asked to do a job. The assembled court of Scarath warriors watched her approach, with expressions ranging from amusement to anticipation. They had seen this performance many times. The alien ambassador would walk forward with false confidence, see the Void Stalker, and then the trembling would begin. Sometimes they fainted, sometimes they ran, sometimes they simply fell to their knees and begged. Kriegther leaned forward on his throne, his massive hand resting on the arm carved from the petrified wood of a world tree from a now-extinct civilization. He waited until Sarah had reached the designated stopping point, marked by a circle of red stone inlaid in the floor. "Ambassador Chen of Earth," his voice boomed through the chamber, enhanced by the acoustics to sound like an earthquake-given speech. "You stand before the unconquered throne of the Scarath Empire. 17 systems bow to my will. 43 species call me master. Do you see my pet?" The Void Stalker raised its head at the word, eyes focusing on Sarah with the intensity of a targeting computer locking onto its mark. "I see it," Sarah replied, her voice clear but not loud. She did not try to match Kriegther's volume. She simply spoke as if they were having a normal conversation. Kriegther's eyes narrowed slightly. Usually by now there would be some sign of fear, a tremor in the voice, a step backward, something. "This creature has killed champions from 7 warrior races," Kriegther continued, rising from his throne to his full, imposing height. "It can smell fear from a kilometer away. It can hear a heartbeat through armor plating. It knows when prey is terrified. And yet, Ambassador Chen, you stand there as if you are waiting for a transit shuttle. Why aren't you trembling, human? One word from me and my pet will devour you." The chamber fell absolutely silent. Every eye was on Sarah, waiting for the inevitable breakdown. Sarah set her briefcase down gently on the stone floor. She looked at the Void Stalker, then back at Kriegther, and her expression was not fearful but puzzled. "Warlord Kriegther, may I approach your companion?" she asked. The question was so unexpected that several of the Scarath warriors actually gasped. One of the subjugated species representatives, a small insectoid creature from the Chittick hive, chittered in what might have been laughter or horror. Kriegther stared at her for a long moment. His pride was injured by her lack of terror, but his curiosity was piqued by her audacity. He gestured with one massive claw. "Approach, then. Let us see how brave you are when you can smell its breath." Sarah picked up her briefcase and walked forward, directly toward the Void Stalker. The creature's muscles tensed, its lips pulling back to reveal those terrible crystal teeth. A low rumble came from deep in its chest, a sound that vibrated through the stone floor. Sarah stopped about 3 meters away and very slowly knelt down, placing her briefcase in front of her. She opened it with deliberate movements, keeping her eyes on the void stalker. From the case, she extracted a small handheld device with a blue screen. "I'm a xenobiologist," Sarah said, her voice calm and professional. "Before I became a diplomat, I spent 20 years studying apex predators across Earth. We have quite a few, you see. Sharks that can smell a drop of blood in an ocean, bears that can kill with a single swipe, big cats that can take down prey 3 times their size. We learned to live alongside all of them." She activated the device, and a soft, humming sound filled the chamber. The void stalker's head tilted slightly, its aggression momentarily replaced by curiosity. "This is a biosignature analyzer," Sarah continued, slowly rising to her feet. "It reads biological stress markers, hormone levels, neural activity patterns. Universal technology works on any carbon-based life form." She took a step closer. The void stalker's tail lashed once, those venomous spines catching the torchlight. "Easy," Sarah murmured, her voice dropping to a gentle tone that somehow carried through the chamber. "Easy there, I'm not here to hurt you." Kriegther watched, his golden eyes narrowed. This was not going according to script. Sarah took another step and another. The void stalker growled, but it was a different sound now. Sarah recognized it from thousands of hours working with Earth's predators. It was not the growl of a hunter about to strike. It was the growl of an animal in pain, warning others away not from strength but from vulnerability. "May I scan your companion?" Sarah asked, glancing at Kriegther but keeping most of her attention on the void stalker. "Proceed," Kriegther said, his voice quieter now, uncertain. Sarah moved to within a meter of the creature and slowly raised the scanner. The device's blue light played across the void stalker's armored hide, collecting data. Sarah's eyes moved across the readout, and her expression shifted from professional interest to concern. "When was the last time this creature received proper veterinary care?" she asked. "Veterinary care?" Kriegther's confusion was evident. "It is a weapon. Weapons do not require care beyond maintenance of their edge." "This is a living being," Sarah said, her tone firm but not accusatory. "And according to these readings, it's suffering from multiple chronic conditions. Look here." She turned the scanner so Kriegther could see the display, though she doubted he could interpret the data. "Elevated cortisol levels indicating constant stress, calcium deficiency suggesting improper diet, and this signature here, that's a severe dental infection. One of its teeth is abscessed. That's why it's been more aggressive lately, isn't it?" Kriegther descended from his throne, moving closer to see what Sarah was showing him. The court watched in stunned silence as their warlord actually engaged with the human's analysis. "It has been irritable," Kriegther admitted. "It's in pain," Sarah corrected gently. "Constant chronic pain, and this defensive posturing, it's not confidence, it's fear masking as aggression because it doesn't know how to ask for help." She looked at the void stalker, and her expression softened in a way that made several of the watching aliens uncomfortable. It was the look of someone seeing a suffering creature, not a weapon. "Where I come from, Warlord Kriegther, we don't let animals suffer. Not our companions, not our livestock, not even our former predators. Would you allow me to treat this infection?" The throne chamber remained frozen in a moment of absolute uncertainty. Kriegther stood beside his throne, staring at the human ambassador who had just offered to treat his most fearsome weapon as if it were a sick pet. The concept was so foreign to everything the Scarath represented that he struggled to process it. "You would." "Heal it?" Kriegther asked slowly, his golden eyes searching Sarah's face for some sign of deception or mockery. "If you permit me, yes," Sarah replied. She was already reaching into her briefcase, pulling out a compact medical kit. "I have broad-spectrum antibiotics that should work on most carbon-based life forms. The infection needs immediate treatment, or it will spread to the bloodstream. That would be fatal, even for something this powerful. But I can help if you'll let me." And now this human, this small creature from a world the Scarath had barely noticed, was offering compassion to an engineered killer. "Do it!" Kriegther commanded, but his voice lacked its usual thunder. He was curious now, truly curious about what would happen next. Sarah moved slowly, telegraphing every motion. She extracted a small injector from her kit and loaded it with a blue liquid. The void stalker watched her with all 6 of its eyes, each one tracking her movements independently. Its muscles remained tense, ready to strike at the first sign of threat. "This is going to hurt for just a moment," Sarah said, speaking to the creature as if it could understand her. Perhaps on some level it could. Predators were intelligent. They had to be. "But then the pain will start to fade, I promise." Even Kriegther felt his heart beating faster, though he would never admit it. Sarah reached out slowly and placed one hand on the Void Stalker's armored jaw, just below where the biosignature had indicated the infection. The creature flinched and several warriors reached for their weapons, but Sarah didn't pull away. She applied gentle pressure, feeling for the swollen area. "Right here," she murmured. "I can feel the inflammation." This must have been agony. The Void Stalker tensed, its claws scraping against the stone floor, but it did not attack. Sarah remained perfectly still, her hand still resting on the creature's jaw. She began speaking in a low, steady voice. "When humans first evolved, we weren't the strongest. We weren't the fastest. We weren't even close to being apex predators. We were prey animals, really. We survived by being smart, by working together, and by making friends with other species." The other alien representatives had inched forward, desperate to hear this explanation. "About 40,000 years ago, we met wolves," Sarah continued. "Apex predators in their own right. They could have seen us as competition or prey. Instead, we found common ground. We hunted together. We protected each other. Eventually, they became dogs, our companions, our partners. We learned that the strongest relationships aren't built on fear, but on mutual benefit and trust." The medication was working quickly, reducing the inflammation and numbing the pain. For the first time in months, perhaps years, the creature felt relief. "Over millennia, we did this with dozens of species," Sarah said. "Horses carried us across continents. Cats protected our food supplies. Birds warned us of danger. We turned predator-prey relationships into partnerships. That's humanity's real strength, Warlord Kriegther, not weapons, not conquest. Understanding." She was gently stroking the Void Stalker's armored head now, and incredibly, the creature was allowing it. Its eyes were half closed, the tension draining from its massive body. "Force can make others obey, but cooperation makes them want to help you. It's more sustainable, more powerful in the long term." "Ambassador Chen, are you suggesting that the Skarath Empire could adopt such methods?" She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each representative, each warrior, and finally Kriegther himself. "I'm suggesting that what works for one creature can work for entire civilizations," Sarah said. "The Galactic Council sent me here because every other species tried to match the Skarath's displays of power. They failed because they were playing a game the Skarath designed. I'm not here to be intimidated. I'm here to offer something different. That contains detailed analysis of resource depletion across the 17 systems under Skarath control," Sarah explained. "Your empire is expanding, but it's not sustainable. The worlds you conquer are producing less each year because ruling through fear doesn't teach anyone how to maintain complex systems. Your empire is burning through resources faster than they can regenerate. Humanity offers an alternative. We bring expertise in ecosystem management, sustainable resource extraction, and most importantly, the ability to turn resentful subjects into willing partners. We've done it on Earth for thousands of years. We can do it across your empire. Access to Skarath technology and knowledge, and the freedom to help other species develop sustainably within your territory. We don't want to conquer you, Warlord. We want to show you that there's a better way to build an empire. One that lasts not just decades, but millennia." His empire was indeed consuming itself, slowly but inevitably. The Void Stalker, now completely relaxed, had shifted its position so that its massive head rested near Sarah's feet. The symbolism was not lost on anyone in the chamber. The creature that represented ultimate power and fear had chosen to rest beside the human who showed it kindness. "You make bold claims," Kriegther said finally. "But words are easy. How do I know your methods actually work beyond taming one sick animal?" It was the smile of someone who had been waiting for exactly that question. "Give me one world, one of your failing colonies where traditional Skarath methods aren't working. Give me 6 months and a team of human specialists. If we can't improve production, sustainability, and local cooperation, then you can dismiss everything I've said. But if we succeed, you agree to implement our recommendations across your empire and formally recognize humanity as partners, not potential subjects." He looked at Sarah, at his pet resting peacefully for the first time in memory, at the gathered representatives watching with barely concealed hope, and at the data showing his empire's slow decline. Necros 4, he said. Ecological collapse, food production failing. Native population rebellious. 3 Skarath governors have tried to fix it with military force. All failed. You have your test, Ambassador Chen. 6 months. Fail, and humanity will bend knee like all the others. Succeed, and we will talk of partnership. Around them, the court erupted in whispered conversations. Something fundamental had just shifted in the galaxy's power structure, and everyone present knew they had witnessed the beginning of something unprecedented. 3 months had passed since Sarah Chen had stood in Kriegther's throne chamber and made her audacious proposal. Now she stood on the surface of Necros 4, watching the twin suns set over a landscape that should have been thriving, but instead looked like a battlefield where nature itself had been defeated. The planet had once been beautiful, according to the historical records. Rolling grasslands, crystal-clear rivers, forests of towering blue-leaf trees that produced fruits rich in nutrients. The native Necrosians, a peaceful species of herbivorous bipeds with silver fur and large, expressive eyes, had lived in harmony with their world for thousands of years. Then the Skarath had arrived. They had seen Necros 4's potential for food production and decided to optimize it through aggressive terraforming and industrial farming. They had cleared forests, diverted rivers, and introduced Earth-style crops and livestock without understanding the delicate balance of the existing ecosystem. The native Necrosians had been relocated to designated zones and put to work in the new agricultural systems, their traditional knowledge dismissed as primitive and inefficient. The result was catastrophic. The introduced species had no natural predators and multiplied out of control. The soil, stripped of its native plants, began to erode. The water systems became polluted. Within 5 years, food production had actually decreased rather than increased. The Necrosians, separated from their traditional lands and forced into labor they didn't understand, had become increasingly resistant to Skarath rule. Sarah had brought a team of 30 humans to fix this mess. Ecologists, agricultural specialists, veterinarians, hydrologists, and cultural anthropologists. They had arrived to find 3 Skarath governors waiting with barely concealed hostility, certain that these soft aliens would fail just as spectacularly as their predecessors. The lead governor, a scarred warrior named Thraka, had made his opinion clear on the first day. You waste time talking to the natives. You waste time studying plants. You should be implementing control measures. Force is what works. She brought translators and food, and most importantly, she brought genuine curiosity about their knowledge. Elder Mara, the eldest of the Necrosian community, had been suspicious at first. Another alien comes to tell us how to live on our own world, she had said, her silver fur rippling with emotion. No, Sarah had replied. I came to learn from you. You've lived here for thousands of years. You understand this planet in ways no outsider ever could. I'm here to listen. They explained how the blue-leaf trees were keystone species. Their roots prevented erosion. Their fallen leaves enriched the soil with specific nutrients. Their flowers attracted pollinators that were essential for dozens of other plant species. When the Skarath had cleared the forests, they had triggered a cascade failure throughout the ecosystem. They described the natural cycles of the grasslands, how certain areas needed to rest while others were grazed. The Skarath's intensive agriculture had ignored these cycles, exhausting the land. They talked about the river systems, how certain fish species kept the water clean by eating specific algae, and how diverting the rivers had destroyed these natural filtration systems. Sarah and her team listened to everything, recorded everything, and then began to build a comprehensive rehabilitation plan that combined Necrosian traditional knowledge with human ecological science. The second month was spent implementing the first phase. They began reintroducing native plant species, starting with the blue-leaf trees. They established rotational grazing patterns that mimicked natural cycles. They worked with the Necrosians to restore sections of the diverted rivers to their original courses. The Skarath governors watched with skepticism. Thraka had complained to Kriegther multiple times that the humans were moving too slowly, that they were coddling the natives, that real results required decisive action. Kriegther, to his credit, had told Thraka to be patient and observe. The warlord himself had visited Necros 4 in the second month, accompanied by his void stalker, which now followed him like a devoted companion rather than a weapon of terror. The creature was healthier, calmer, and had become something of a celebrity across the Empire. Other Scarath had begun questioning how they treated their own animals. During that visit, Kriegther had walked through the restored sections with Sarah. The difference was already visible. Areas where blue-leaf saplings had been planted showed reduced erosion. Sections where rotational grazing had been implemented showed new growth of native grasses. River sections that had been restored were running clearer. "It is slow," Kriegther had observed. "Ecosystems aren't machines," Sarah had explained. "You can't just flip a switch and fix them. They're more like living relationships. You have to nurture them, give them time to heal, and work with their natural patterns rather than against them." Food production in the restored areas had increased by 30% compared to the Scarath-controlled zones. The Necrosians working in these areas were enthusiastic and productive, offering suggestions and improvements based on their traditional knowledge. The water quality in restored river sections had improved dramatically, but the most significant change wasn't measurable in statistics. It was the transformation in how the Necrosians viewed the entire situation. They were no longer resentful workers laboring under occupation. They had become active participants in healing their world, working alongside humans who treated them as equals and valued their expertise. Sarah stood now in a restored valley, watching as Necrosian families worked alongside human ecologists to plant the season's crops using traditional patterns that the elders had remembered. Children played near the restored river, catching fish with methods their grandparents had taught them, methods that had been forbidden under Scarath rule. Elder Mara approached, moving with the graceful gait of her species. "Ambassador Chen, I must tell you something important. Kinder perhaps, but still outsiders who would take what they wanted and leave us with nothing. I was wrong. You asked us what we needed instead of telling us what you wanted. You treated our knowledge as valuable instead of primitive. You worked beside us instead of standing over us. This is not conquest. This is. I do not have a word in your language. We would work with them as we work with you. Not because we fear them, but because cooperation benefits all of us." The idea that mutual respect and cooperation could transform enemies into allies. A communication device at Sarah's belt chimed. It was a message from Thraka, terse and grudging. "Warlord Kriegther arrives tomorrow for final assessment. All governors required to present findings." She thought about Kriegther and his slowly changing perspective, about the void stalker that now symbolized a different kind of strength, about an empire that stood at a crossroads between the old ways and something new. "Elder Mara," Sarah said, "would you and the other elders be willing to speak to Warlord Kriegther tomorrow, to tell him directly what you've told me? That would be unprecedented. It is time the Scarath heard the truth from those they rule, not just from their governors. Tomorrow would determine not just the fate of this mission, but potentially the future of dozens of species across the Scarath Empire. Everything came down to whether one warlord could truly embrace a completely different vision of power without short-heading." 0410. As it landed in the central settlement area, Sarah watched the Necrosian children peek out from behind their parents with curiosity rather than terror. That alone told her how much had changed. The warlord emerged from his ship accompanied by his void stalker, which now walked calmly at his side rather than straining against restraints. Behind them came an entourage of Scarath officials, military observers, and representatives from several of the subjugated species. This assessment had become something of a galactic event, with many watching to see if humanity's approach could truly work. Governor Thraka stood at attention, flanked by the other two governors who had overseen the failed attempts to fix Necros 4. All three looked uncomfortable, though for different reasons. Thraka still believed that force was the answer and resented being proven wrong. The other two had begun to see the wisdom in Sarah's methods, but were uncertain how to admit they had been wrong for so long. Sarah stepped forward to greet Kriegther, offering the same respectful but equal gesture she had given him in the throne room months ago. The void stalker recognized her immediately and made a low, pleased rumble deep in its chest. Sarah reached out and briefly touched its armored head, and the creature leaned into her hand like an enormous cat. "Warlord Kriegther," Sarah said. "Welcome to Necros 4. I believe you'll find that much has changed since your last visit." Kriegther's golden eyes surveyed the settlement, taking in details that would have been invisible to a casual observer. The buildings were clean and well-maintained. The Necrosians moved about their business with purpose rather than the defeated shuffle of the oppressed. The land itself looked healthier, greener, more alive. "Show me," Kriegther commanded, but his voice lacked its usual thunder. He was genuinely curious about what he would find. Sarah led the group on a walking tour of the restored areas. She had deliberately planned the route to show the progression from devastated land through various stages of recovery. They started in a section that still bore the scars of the Scarath's original terraforming, then moved through areas at different stages of restoration. At each stop, Sarah explained what had been done, but more importantly, she let the Necrosians themselves describe the traditional knowledge they had contributed. Elder Mara walked with them, speaking with increasing confidence about how her people's understanding of the land had been essential to the recovery. "The blue-leaf trees are not just trees," Mara explained as they stood in a grove of saplings that had been planted 2 months earlier. "They are the foundation of our entire ecosystem. Their roots communicate with each other through fungal networks underground, sharing nutrients and water. When the Scarath cleared the old forests, they destroyed these networks. We had to rebuild them carefully, planting in specific patterns that our ancestors discovered over thousands of years." One of the Scarath officials, a younger warrior named Kresh, spoke up. "But surely modern agricultural science is more efficient than ancient traditions." Mara turned to him with patience rather than anger. "Efficiency and sustainability are not the same thing, young warrior. Your methods produced more food quickly, yes, but they exhausted the land. Our methods produce less initially but can continue forever. Which is truly more efficient? A harvest that feeds you for a year or a system that feeds your descendants for 1,000 years? Kresh had no answer for that. They continued to the restored river sections, where the water ran clear and fish were visible swimming in schools. A group of Necrosian children were learning traditional fishing methods from their elders, using woven nets that caught only adult fish and allowed juveniles to escape. Sarah's colleague, Dr. Marcus Webb, a hydrologist, explained the technical aspects. The Scarath's diversion created stagnant pools that became breeding grounds for harmful bacteria. By restoring the natural flow and reintroducing native fish species that feed on algae, we've created a self-cleaning system. The water quality has improved by 70%, and it requires no ongoing intervention or expensive filtration systems. Kriegther knelt by the water's edge, his massive form surprisingly graceful. He dipped a claw in the stream and watched the water flow around it. "And the food production, that was the original goal of this colony. Increased by 42% in the restored zones," Sarah replied, pulling up data on her tablet. "And that's with the land only partially recovered. Projections suggest we'll see continued increases over the next 5 years as the ecosystem reaches full maturity. More importantly, this production level is sustainable indefinitely. The old Scarath methods were depleting the soil. In another decade, this planet would have been unable to grow anything at all." Governor Thraka stepped forward, his posture aggressive. "But what of control? The natives are not properly supervised. They work when they wish, rest when they wish. This is not discipline. This is chaos waiting to happen." Before Sarah could respond, Elder Mara spoke, her voice firm. "Governor Thraka, I will tell you something important. Under your rule, my people produced food because we feared punishment. We worked slowly, we sabotaged equipment when we could, and we dreamed of rebellion. Under Ambassador Chen's partnership, we produce food because we are healing our world and feeding our children. We work efficiently, we maintain equipment carefully, and we dream of a better future. Which serves your empire better? Fearful workers who hate you, or willing partners who benefit from their own labor?" The silence that followed was profound. No subjugated species had ever spoken to a Scarath governor with such directness. Thraka's scales flushed darker with anger, but before he could respond, Kriegther raised his hand. "The elder speaks truth," Kriegther said, his voice carrying across the gathering. "I have been considering this deeply since Ambassador Chen entered my throne room. Fear is a tool I understand. Fear is a weapon I have wielded with great success, but fear has limits." He stood to his full height, addressing not just those present but speaking as if making a pronouncement to the entire empire. I have conquered 17 systems. I command 43 species, but each conquest requires more forces to maintain than the last. Each subjugated world produces less as resentment grows. I have built an empire on fear, and I have been watching it slowly collapse under its own weight. The assembled Skarath officials shifted uncomfortably. This was not what they had expected from their warlord. Kriegther continued, "The human ambassador showed me something I did not understand. When she approached my void stalker without fear and healed its pain, she demonstrated a power I had never considered. The power to transform an enemy into an ally. The power to create willing cooperation instead of forced obedience." He gestured to the landscape around them. "Look at what has been accomplished here in mere months, not through superior weapons, not through threats, through knowledge, respect, and partnership. The Necrosians work harder now than they ever did under our rule, and they do so willingly." Kriegther turned to face Sarah directly. "Ambassador Chen, humanity has proven its claims. You have taken a failing world and made it thrive. You have turned resentful subjects into enthusiastic partners. You have demonstrated that your methods are not just idealistic words but practical solutions." He paused, and Sarah felt her heart racing. This was the moment that would determine everything. "I hereby accept humanity as equal partners in the Skarath Empire," Kriegther declared. "Furthermore, I command that the methods demonstrated here be implemented across all subjugated worlds. The governors will work with human advisors and native populations to transition from rule by fear to rule by cooperation. This will not be quick, and it will not be easy, but it will be done." The Skarath officials erupted in shocked murmurs. Some looked horrified, others thoughtful, a few actually relieved. The representatives from subjugated species could barely contain their hope. Thraka stepped forward, his voice tight. "Warlord, this goes against everything the Skarath stand for. We are warriors. We conquer. We dominate." "No, Thraka," Kriegther replied. "We are survivors. We adapt. We overcome. And I tell you now that the greatest threat to our empire is not external enemies but our own methods. We have been consuming ourselves. The humans offer us a way to build something that will last not just years but centuries." He looked at Sarah again. "What does humanity require to help implement these changes across our territory?" Sarah took a breath, steadying herself. "Access to all worlds in your empire. Authority to work directly with native populations. Recognition of human expertise in ecological and cultural matters. And one more thing." "Name it," Kriegther said. "Freedom," Sarah replied. "Not just for humanity, but for all species in your empire. Not independence necessarily, but genuine autonomy. The right to govern themselves with Skarath oversight rather than Skarath control. Partnership means both sides have a voice." The request was audacious, perhaps even dangerous. But Sarah had learned something important about Kriegther. He respected boldness, especially when backed by demonstrated competence. Kriegther was silent for a long moment, his golden eyes locked on Sarah's. Then, slowly, he extended his massive claw toward her. "Agreed," he said. "Let us build an empire worth ruling, one based not on fear, but on mutual benefit." Sarah clasped his claw, sealing the agreement that would reshape the balance of power across multiple star systems.